Welcome to the Voice of San Diego at home live stream. It's July 8th, 2020. We are careening through the pandemic. I remember when I started these back a few months ago, thought maybe do it for a few weeks, just keep everybody's connected, keep everybody going. But now we are into July. We are well into July. Hello, I'm Scott Lewis. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice San Diego, going live again. We've got a great show today. Going to have one of our reporters come in and talk to me about her great story. That's Kayla Jimenez. She did a story about Westview High School in the Poway Unified School District and some real dark situations with educators not speaking or working appropriately with kids. And we're going to talk about what happened and obviously did not happen in some of those cases. It's a fascinating story from Kayla Jimenez, so stick around for that. Schools got a lot of school stuff to go over. I think, but I wanted to start first with a little bit of Rocky. You know Rocky? I like him. He sometimes falls asleep as babies sometimes do, as the little ones sometimes do in strange little places. So love Rocky. He's a good kid. He's been a lot of fun. He's starting to figure out the where he should pee and where he shouldn't pee thing. It's hard for all of us. Takes a while. Takes humans like years, right? 2 years, 3 years. All right. Got a lot to talk about. Let's get right into it. Schools, we've got very little new information about what's going to happen to schools. We talked last week or Monday about Poway Unified School District's remarkable decision and email where they seem to indicate to parents that, hey, we're sorry that anybody seemed to take the idea that we were either pro-mask or anti-mask. We're neither. We got no position on masks. We're just, even though they're obviously going to have to take a position on masks at some point. We've talked obviously about every district seems to be heading towards the same general idea, which is, yeah, we're going to open schools to some degree, but we're also going to have a robust online platform. We are also going to, and some districts are going to do a hybrid. Now, Poway Unified School District decided to only do either fully remote or fully online or fully in person. And so they got a little bit of blowback from that. A petition was sent out of educators and parents saying, whoa, you need to reconsider that, and also the masks and everything else. So yesterday, the county of San Diego, you might remember, Dr. Rebecca Fielding Miller and I have talked a lot on this show about testing, how important testing is to everything we want to do to live life right now. Rebecca Fielding Miller studied HIV. The concept of know your status became a major way for them, for the community who is at risk for HIV, to go about their lives. And we have to have a similar program here. A lot of businesses are managing to test. Baseball is trying to get back into the action, obviously struggling a little bit to test. And yesterday, for the first time, I've been talking about this for a long time, we got some great or potentially really interesting news from the county of San Diego. Supervisor Nathan Fletcher proposed $10 million, later reduced it to $5 million from the federal CARES Act relief legislation. That money, $5 million, should go to testing at school sites. Again, if we're going to go back, we're going to go rub shoulders at a school, testing could be a big part of that. I've seen anybody in local government get involved in the situation at schools. So I was heartened that somebody's just taking it on. His supervisor colleagues weren't that into it, though. They weren't sure about it. There was $25 million of the $48 million that they had going for them in this CARES Act legislation. $25 million was going to go to childcare. About $19 million to food for seniors, especially food services. And then he wanted $5 million to go to testing. And here was Supervisor Kristen Gaspar, who was opposed to that whole situation. She did not want the money in any form to go to testing at schools. And here was her reasoning on that. This is Supervisor Kristen Gaspar. She represents the North Coast area on the County Board of Supervisors.
I actually have a disagreement with the $5 million going to the testing within the schools. As a mother of 3, I prefer to keep my child's medical care between my trusted pediatric team. And if we're trying to come up with a way to test our kids at school, that's something as a parent I'd be extremely uncomfortable with. So I do not support $5 million in testing going to our K through 12 schools as a mom.
Wow. Does not support testing at schools. Now, let's remember, it's not just for the kids. In fact, if I had a limited resource, limited supply of tests or availability of tests, I wouldn't focus on the kids. I would focus on the adults, the actual employees, the public employees. They're the ones I think that are most vulnerable to this situation. Obviously, we've got tons of research that indicate that children aren't suffering too much from the disease and aren't transmitting it very much. And so, but there's plenty of people who work with kids who probably have many of the underlying conditions or just are more vulnerable to the virus. They're the ones that may benefit in many cases from more robust testing. Nonetheless, the Board of Supervisors did approve that plan. They're going to spend $25 million on childcare, which itself is wonderful to hear in the sense that childcare, the entire infrastructure of childcare in this community has been completely eviscerated all across the country. Of course, same thing, just brutalized by the pandemic, by the layoffs and if you're a childcare provider, if you work with preschool kids, for example, tough calculation if you're on unemployment to go back into the lion's den, if you will, of all of their germs and such. And even if you could stay out for a while. So tough situation for childcare across the country. We cannot have a functioning economy if we do not have a functioning infrastructure of childcare in schools. So I looked up Rebecca Fielding Miller. We've talked to her a lot, epidemiologist, UC San Diego, professor of infectious diseases. And she said, I cannot think of anything that should be a higher priority. I cannot think of anything that should be a higher priority than ensuring robust, frequent, and culturally competent testing for childcare and schools. I cannot think of anything that should be a higher priority. Counterpoint, bars. What about bars? What about drinking? Have you thought of the drinkers? Have you thought of PB nightlife? Dr. Rebecca Fielding Miller. Have you thought of all the things we could be doing to party right now, Dr. Rebecca Fielding Miller? All right, so this was not in isolation. There was a big discussion started yesterday about schools. President Trump, of course, we talked about it on Monday, made his big announcement that schools should open. I love his governing style. Do it. Okay, thanks. Helpfully, some folks pointed out that it's not just a matter of deciding to do it. It's kind of hard, and it's kind of hard because of your government. The CDC itself put out their own recommendations about what should happen to schools when they open. This man, Michael Petrilli, pointed out, he's from the Fordham Institute, also a fellow at the Hoover Institute in Stanford. He says the administration's own guidance from the CDC recommends social distancing in classrooms and on buses, which almost surely means not operating schools at anywhere near full capacity. This is the big problem. It's one thing to say go back to school, but just do it. Just go back to school. But if you also say, oh, you also have to keep kids 6 feet apart, that's a big deal. That's hard. What we're finding out is that schools are, 80% the logistics of getting kids in one place safely and moving them around that one place safely for like 6-7 hours a day. And when you make that exponentially harder with something like this, then it's hard. It's not just, we should open schools. How, sir? So President Trump had an answer. He heard me bellowing. He heard me screaming in my heart. He said, I just disagree with the CDC on their very tough and expensive guidelines. I'll be meeting with them. This is driving me nuts. How do we have a situation where the president of the United States has no idea what his own government does? He so often acts like he's not in charge of his government that he's presiding over. He's the president of. It's just, and it's this dissonance that we see all the time. It trickles down. It's colored our entire response to the virus. Well, yeah, it's a big deal. It's a war. Oh, it's not a big deal. We need to go just live our lives. What is it? What? Get it together. Figure out what you're thinking. You're in charge of this government. Let's check in with all of you. I love tuning into these. Thanks, Scott. Love that you're here, Robin. Thank you. What did you expect from Trump? I don't know. Can I still hold the president accountable? All right, we've got more to talk about. I also wanted to get to a story we've done about the San Diego Unified School District. San Diego Unified School District had an $84 million budget crisis before all of this started. All of these crises started, had an $84 million budget. They were talking about budget deficit. They were talking about layoffs. They were talking about problems. Our Ashley McGlone did a great story at voiceofsandiego.org. Check it out. She pointed out that they did balance their budget, and they were proud of it a couple weeks ago. But the budget is only balanced insofar, this is Ashley McGlone, insofar as one-time coronavirus aid is plugging the gap between revenues and expenditures. More than $122 million in coronavirus aid will prop up the district's budget for next year. It includes $30 million in CARES Act emergency relief and another $91 million in so-called learning loss money allocated by the state. So not only did they keep the budget where they thought, they didn't get the cut that they thought they were, they got the budget reestablished. They got all of this money in addition from CARES Act, and now they're demanding from the federal government even more money to handle some of these costs. And so they are setting themselves up for a huge budget problem next year, but that is how they balance the budget. Nobody explains that stuff better than Ashley McGlone. I also wanted to alert you to another development yesterday for San Diego Unified School District. This is the question of elections. So San Diego Unified School District is broken up into 5 different sub-districts. All right, A, B, C, D, and E. So what happens is when you are running for school district in these sub-districts, so say there's 4 people running in District E and 5 people running in District C, well, then the top 2 people who are in the primary become eligible for the runoff. But when they run in the runoff, they have to run over the entire 5 districts, which cover almost the entire city of San Diego, which is very hard. Ask a mayoral candidate or a city attorney candidate how hard it is to reach voters across the entire city. And so District E, for example, you have 2 candidates running this time, Sharon Whitehurst Payne and Dr. Luana Richmond, and they have to now appeal. Sharon Whitehurst Payne is running for re-election. They have to appeal now to the entire at-large area. So they're running in this area, but they have to appeal to voters in La Jolla, voters in Scripps Ranch, and voters in Serra Mesa. So there are a lot of people for years who have said this isn't right. Every other government has had to do district elections so that they're more representative of their area, that we shouldn't have people in La Jolla or whatever vetoing the choice of some area down in different areas. And so that has been a push for many years, but finally the Democrats got on board with it. And this time they now put it on the ballot. The city council, by the way, the city council has charter authority over the San Diego Unified School District. Those are separate agencies. So, for instance, you can't cut the police budget and give the money to the school district. The police are part of the city. The San Diego Unified School District is a separate agency. However, it is an agency created by the city charter of the city of San Diego. And so the city charter has to be changed if you want to change something like this. And so what is going forward on the November ballot is a change which would say, like, if you're running in District E, you stay in District E. Your two top candidates get out of the primary, and they then run for that seat in the general, only trying to appeal to those areas in their sub-district. So that change will be on your November ballot. If you're in the city of San Diego, interested in your thoughts on that, if you're part of San Diego Unified School District. All right. There is another story I wanted to talk about. It's about Poway Unified School District and a high school there called Westview. Our Kayla Jimenez has been doing a lot of research and investigation for many years about sexual abuse and misconduct in schools. And the narrative, we did a lot of work over a couple of years on this story, on these investigations. And, it sort of slowed down a bit, but she did an amazing story a couple of days ago. I wanted to bring her on. Hello, Kayla. How are you?
Hi, Scott. I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you. I think your video will catch up in just a sec. There we go. Yes, Westview High School. I'm going to pull up a graphic that we ran with the story. This was the lead graphic. This is an illustration we did that illustrated actual text messages between a teacher and his, I guess, former student. Can you explain what's going on here?
Yeah, so this graphic has text messages to two different students. The one that caught attention in recent weeks was one former student, Teresa, who I talked to. She started a petition calling for changes at Westview because one of her former teachers, Derek Peterson, who is currently a teacher at the school, sent her an inappropriate text message when she had got to college and had turned 18. And she had him as a teacher during her senior year, and she decided to release those messages after she had seen our previous story about another student who had reported inappropriate text messages from this teacher. And she was concerned that the teacher had recently friended her on Facebook and was being so persistent to stay in contact with her after all these years.
Yeah, so this is part of a bigger pattern. That's what you investigated. Tell me what we found about the broader situation at Westview. There was obviously a cultural, at least indications there's a cultural problem there. And then what happened after investigations occurred?
Yeah, so the story goes through a decade's worth of 6 teachers who were found or accused of misconduct, sexual or text messages. It ranges from groping to actual sexual contact. And what we found was that the Poway Unified School District officials wouldn't dismiss a teacher or consider that unless there was actual sexual contact. So anything that people would consider as grooming, such as inappropriate text messages or hugs to students and different things that students had accused these teachers of doing to them, the Poway Unified District had said that those instances were inappropriate but not sexual and not enough to remove them from their positions at the school. And a lot of the parents and the students that I talked to said there's sort of this culture at Westview where these teachers get away with harassing female students at the school. And it's a culture there that's been going on for years, in part because of how close the community at the school is. And there's instances where teachers are driving students home to and from school, having events at their house, especially for athletic sporting events, which we found 5 of the teachers that I investigated were coaches at the school. And that's how they ended up having these connections with students that weren't exactly teacher-student appropriate and out of school hours.
So if somebody there, you found instances where they actually sent, I mean, inappropriate communications. They actually, obviously, like this one says, like your quote dirty little mouth. Like that's some pretty rough things. If somebody sent that to my daughter, I would be horrified. And what you're saying, not only did they weren't dismissed. They said, look, it would have had to make it so that they would have had to have actual physical contact to make it something they would act on.
Right. And they also said because it was a first report, it wasn't enough to terminate them. And in one instance in the story, we come across a different teacher who had 4 girls across the board say that they had been harassed by this teacher, and he ended up resigning. So in the middle of an investigation. So it looks like there needs to be multiple reports from one teacher, but a first offense wouldn't do anything.
You recently had a forum here, well, I guess here being the internet, about how what you learned from this whole process, and now as we've transitioned to this online learning world and where we're all connecting more online, that we have to be even more vigilant for how students and teachers are interacting on these text message or social media platforms. What's been your larger takeaways about what's wrong with how these situations are dealt with, and what to look forward to as far as how we can protect students and make sure that teachers can still have productive interactions as they go forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the trends that we found from our numerous documents that we got from our public records request into teacher misconduct from schools was that a lot of the teacher misconduct had initiated from electronic communications, whether it's text or social media or emails, and one-on-one with teacher and student. And that was before schools went into online learning. Now, before that, schools had started to enact policies where they had put these clear guidelines in place saying that that's not allowed, and they have to include a parent on a text message if there's going to be communication, or other ways to put a line through the boundaries. So it's not such a gray line of who can communicate. Can I text a student about homework or about schooling, coaching, for example? And now they're going and being told that they have to communicate fully online with students, especially as we're now into online learning. And so there's this question of, are students going to be more susceptible to abuse through electronic communications? Is there going to be more grooming starting now via text and social media that could amplify once schools go back into session?
Let's take this is a good question from Bill Osborne. Is the culture at Westview any different than other schools, other districts? Aren't the policies and systems sort of generally the same? I think that's a good point. Like, what did we learn? Are there schools that really stand out, or is it just kind of there's a certain level of problem throughout the society? Really, we've heard about situations across the country.
Mm-hmm. So at Westview specifically, this has been, when I first wrote about Westview, it was one case of a teacher, Tim Medlock, and a parent had reached out to us and said, when they saw our reporting, and said, hey, this teacher sent inappropriate text messages to her daughter. And we questioned why we didn't get records about this teacher from the school district. And then we went in and individually requested from his personnel records. And then we start getting more concerns from different parents and different students coming in, and we individually requested from this school. So it's not very chance that it happened, but more that we were covering it and more people started coming forward with stories about Westview. And then that revealed a bigger culture of, this is a school that's very prestigious, and there's a lot of pressure to get into these big schools, and there's this culture where athletics are so important, and people, the sports are it's a big part of culture there, and after school activities. And those are the things that I've found reporting, especially on grooming and abuse in schools, where teachers and coaches have especially high contact with students outside of school hours.
Yeah, there is something sort of through line in the stories that we've done that often many of these educators that are involved in these inappropriate or downright abusive situations are often very popular or very well known, or have different clubs or things like that. So it's not rogue or just separate people. It's often people very embedded in the culture of the school. One of the things we've spent some time on, I mean, to your point about the how we end up finding out about this, just to recall, we started investigating this stuff because we had heard about a situation at La Jolla High School, and we, for 2 years, tried to investigate it. And then after the Me Too movement broke out, we were able to get a lot more people on the record and start doing that story. And then all of a sudden, we were deluged with tips and ideas from across the region, and we followed them diligently for years. And so I think that that's one reason why some of these hotspots emerge. So there's probably other things going on, but it takes like somebody to stand up for more to come out. What did you learn though about the broader system? More like, why we've talked so much over the last couple of weeks about how hard it is to discipline or fire police officers. It seems like there's a similar situation in schools when there's so-called bad apples. It's very hard to do anything about it.
Right. And going back to commenting on the culture at Westview, I think that has a bigger picture. Is I interviewed a lot of people who told me that there's this culture at Westview where teachers are protecting each other. And the complaint goes to a principal, and the principal is really good friends with the teacher. And they say, hey, stop doing that. And there's not a streamlined process like going through the Title IX op coordinator and going through the district. And because there's such tight connections there, some parents have said they're believing adults over students, for example. Bigger picture wise, I think this story kind of illuminates how the district is saying we're not going to fire a teacher because they have due process rights through their union contracts. And there are protections at multiple levels that teachers have through the union, and then they have their credentialing from the state credentialing agency. And there's multiple processes where a teacher has to be removed from a school, and then if they're removed from a school, we often see that they go to a different school, or they're quietly moved to a different school within the school district. And then it's the level at the credentialing agency. If they have their credential revoked, then that's a whole different process that we've seen. And then we see in a bigger picture, if you're going to nationally, if a credential is taken away, that they can move from a different state. So it's a huge issue that we see, but locally it starts at the school level, and whether this principal is going to take a next step and believe students, or if they're going to protect the teachers that are in place.
Yeah. Well, I think on behalf of parents all across the region, thanks for continuing that investigative work. You can find much of what Kayla and Ashley McGlone have investigated over the last 2 years on voiceofsandiego.org, and search for the latest, the Westview story. Great piece. If you're, speaking to teachers or to parents, what was the one thing you would want people to know about going forward as they try to manage these issues? To keep in mind, we've learned more about mandated reporting, for example, and other issues. Anything you want to leave parents with?
Sure. I think a lot of people now, especially now that we're moving to online learning, are saying to keep an eye out on what students are talking to their teachers about, and whether they're having one-on-one communications with them. And then to know that teachers are mandated reporters and they're required to report any suspected child abuse to authorities. And I think a lot of people have trouble with saying there's a gray line. Well, should I report this or not? And I think authorities say if you think anything is wrong, to always make that step, take that step and report it to police and child welfare services. And then the district attorney's office now has a reporting system that they just put in place a few months ago. So that's another avenue as well.
It looks like my team posted the link where you can find all those things. Voice of San Diego School Sexual Misconduct, searching that in Google as well would get you there. Kayla Jimenez, great work. Thanks for, on behalf of everybody, thanks for continuing to investigate.
Thank you, Scott.
Right.
Have a good one.
You too. All right. Well, Kayla has done great work. And again, you can find that at the Voice of San Diego. The link is in the comments in Facebook there. Check that out. We got a comment, looks like from a school board candidate. Crystal, thank you for weighing in. You're running in, we talked about those districts. So this is, she is in this one, this District A. Up here, she says, as a parent, I believe it's imperative any electronic communication between teachers and students include guardian access. I agree to a certain extent. I think there was that issue that came up when we spoke with the school board representative, the student who represents students on the school board. And he said, he was trying to advocate for students to get more direct communications as well. So it's a tough balance because you don't want to treat, 16, 17-year-old as a baby that can't take their own communications. On the other hand, you can't also necessarily trust sometimes some of these interactions. So I hope we can continue to improve those processes and appreciate the investigative work. So that's the kind of work our team does every day, bigger investigative pieces along with explanatory work. So let's take on an explanatory problem here. I got a quote or a question here from Doug Clark. In today's morning report, there was an item about the county board hiring a statistician to check their statistics. So what's going on there? Well, turns out I'm happy to tell you, Doug. So there was that discussion where we had we talked to heard from Supervisor Kristen Gaspar earlier about her concerns about testing in schools. Well, she also, as part of the effort to spend the $48 million that the county got from the CARES Act, there was a big discussion about, she wanted to include in there the hiring of a statistician to look at the county's own numbers about COVID-19 patients. And her argument, which I think is going along the lines that Supervisor Jim Desmond has been going along for quite some time now, which is basically like, hey, the numbers aren't so bad, that she really wants to be able to present to people in San Diego what she thinks is the reality, that it's not that bad, that if you get the disease, you have a very, very high likelihood of surviving if you get the virus, especially if you're under 40. And she wants an independent numbers analysis to be done to present to the public a more optimistic vision about how to just kind of live with the virus, just deal with it. There was a couple reactions to that. One, Nathan Fletcher opposed it. He was one of 4 who opposed it. He said, "We have our own statisticians on staff. Are you saying we don't trust them? Why can't they just do whatever work you want to be seen done?" And so she's obviously maybe not or sort of in a very subtle way, she's pushing a kind of distrust about the county's public health office numbers. And so that was a really interesting sort of side note. I'm glad you followed up on it and picked up on it, Doug, because I think that was a side drama in yesterday's meeting at the County Board of Supervisors. Look, we're all paying a lot more attention to what county supervisors do. There's 5 supervisors. Kristen Gaspar is one of them. She's in a tough re-election campaign. Jim Desmond and her have been united in a way about reopen, reopen, reopen. We can't choose between the economy and the virus. Let's just run the economy and deal with the consequences of the virus, wear masks, all those things. And so she's really frustrated with the idea of shutting down any businesses as we deal with this. Now, there's a counterpoint, of course, which is that there's more than just deaths. She says, well, 99% of people survive if you're under 40. Well, that's true, except that a lot of people go to the ICU for several weeks. My friend, pretty well-known poker player in San Diego, he looks like he's getting out of the hospital this week. We're all very relieved to hear about it. But he was in their rough situation for like 10 days. It's not just deaths. I keep making this point, but I wish people would spend a little bit more time saying dealing with the actual consequences. So been watching the hospitalization numbers. That's the one I think everybody should follow up. How are the hospitalization numbers doing? They plateaued a little bit. In fact, should we pull up the triggers and check them out today? All right. You convinced me. Triggers. This is our daily update about where we're at with certain triggers. The triggers are set up so that we can, basically they're saying, let's let the economy run. Oh, you got my email coming through. Let the economy run. And these are the triggers that we're going to watch. And if they cross the line, we're going to maybe cut back. So the main trigger is this case rate. This is the one that shut us down from the state. They said if we have greater than 100 per 100,000 residents of cases measured using the date of illness with a 3-day lag, then we have crossed a line. And that's why we had to shut indoor dining down. I'm surprised they haven't shut down gyms. Gyms still go. This is the other major one, county outbreaks, community outbreaks. There's 22. Kristen Gaspar made the point that outbreak sounds like a really tough word, but outbreak just means a couple people got it, which is true. But we're only supposed to have 7 or more outbreaks per 7-day period, or 7 or less outbreaks per 7-day period. We're at 22, which is more than 7. And then this one over here, the investigations, they want to make sure they're doing tracing investigations. Now, this is the one I've been watching. Remember last week it spiked to 19% increase in hospitalization. It has gone down since then. It's still above where it was last week, though. That's how those percentages work. So we're all watching that hospitalization number really closely to make sure. That's a very concerning one for me. I think that's I have a friend who works in a hospital, says a lot of the rooms are being filled with young people who stay in the ICU a long time. So it's not just that you survive. It's about also having, we don't want to fill the ICUs. That's part of the point. All right, let's take another question. More and more people have permanent damage. Yes, I think that's another side point. It's not just, it's being considered more than just a pulmonary disease, but actually a vascular disease as well. And it's having weird consequences in different parts of the body for different people. And so I think that the conversation about schools is really important because I think that that if we get schools right, we can get restaurants right, we can get bars right. And that was part of my frustration. You had Kristen Gaspar and the supervisor saying, like, we can't test. I don't want to test kids at school. But then she spends not quite 20, maybe at least 80% of the rest of her time talking about restaurants and bars. I just cannot fathom in what universe, especially somebody with 3 kids, restaurants and bars is more important to get right now than schools. And the dilemma that schools are facing is extraordinary. I mean, this logistical challenge that the CDC and that the state and that the county Office of Education have thrown at schools is just brutal. I mean, you can't demand that a school open and also say, oh yeah, you just have to completely redo how kids get and act at school. And the masks thing is a side point. Like, Poway Unified struggling over masks is a really interesting story to me. I don't know what each of these districts are going to do about masks. Are they going to say, masks are required. And if they do, on the one side, they're going to get a bunch of people who are like, I'm not wearing masks. And there's going to be a bunch of viral videos of students not wearing masks, of teachers calling the police if they can't get them to comply. On the other hand, if they don't wear masks, well, they're going to transmit the disease more. It's just a fact. And so what are we doing? And so just those basic questions have really paralyzed public school administrators, and we're getting absolutely no guidance of any significance from the state and from the federal government. And everybody's punting the topic because there's no leaders, and it should start from the top, from the very top. And so we can be all sad and hand-wringing about how bad of a dissonance is coming out of the federal government, but it has real consequences on our actual lives in getting schools open. I remain just tremendously disturbed by the whole situation. All right, let's do one quick trip over what is happening at voiceofsandiego.org. This is our main platform, of course. So Voice of San Diego, you can always follow all the work that we do here at voiceofsandiego.org. And I will make sure we can. Yeah, so there we go. Let's go through a tour. So we have that story about the budget deficit at San Diego Unified and how they closed that with one-time aid, setting up quite an interesting story for next year. That might be why they're pushing so hard for more relief from the federal government. Also, we have there is a massive overhaul in how San Diego, the city of San Diego, does permitting and its land use codes. It sounds complicated, but basically the mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulkner, wants to completely overhaul how the city decides to approve housing in particular, and allow a lot more housing near transit, and in exchange have developers pay bigger fees for things like parks and infrastructure nearby. And that relates to this story that we did about parks, talked about it on Monday. If you check out this story, there is no better explanation about why, for example, Skyline or Barrio Logan or Sherman Heights have really mediocre parks, but Carmel Valley has really nice rec centers and parks. And it's because of how developer impact fees work, and the mayor wants to change those. Great explanation in this story by Mackenzie Elmer. I would check that out. Also, the border report was really good this week. All the stories we talked last week about suspension rates of Black students. So check that out. Also sign up for the morning report here. That is the best way to follow Voice of San Diego. Every day we put out a story about what we think you should care about that Voice of San Diego has done, and what we think you should care about that other places in San Diego have done about local public affairs or investigative journalism. All right. Thanks to Kayla Jimenez for coming on board and talking about that story. Great story there. And I appreciate her taking that time. That's what our reporters do every day. They go out and investigate. And they go out and explain. We have the two-part job to dig up things that people don't want us to find, and then to also explain how the community works. So check that out there. And appreciate everybody's support. Also, a shout out to Megan Wood, who helps me put this show together and all these fancy graphics. And check that out. Again, go to voiceofsandiego.org. I appreciate your support, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.